against the bailout. Shortly after, Martin organized her first Tea Party rally in Atlanta. In February 2010, Martin was named Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential Leaders. She is a co-author of Tea Party Patriots, The Second American Revolution. Please welcome Jenny Beth Martin.
Oh, thank you so much, Wisconsin, for having me here. I come from the free state of Georgia, and I can tell you I love freedom. It is so great to be here with you today. I'm very fortunate that I'm from a state that our governor reopened very quickly, and he's been watching the numbers closely, and it kind of ebbs and flows, but he's doing everything that he can to make sure that the people in Georgia are able to balance the serious nature of this virus for those who are at high risk with the lives and livelihoods of everyone else. I just wish more governors and more state legislatures and more local government officials would do the same thing. And that is why I'm here today. I have three different things I want to hit on for you today. One, where I live, our schools have now reopened. So there is hope. Schools are reopening in some places around the country. School where I live normally starts on August 1st. So this year would have been the 3rd because last weekend was the 1st. But it was 5 days a week in classrooms. Masks are requested, not required. So that is, and 78% of the students are back. So some are not, and there was an option for virtual learning, but you had the choice, and where I live, 78% wanted their children to get back and get an education. We're going to have to live through that and figure out how we deal with social distancing in there, and there are lessons that we're learning as we go, but I just want to make sure that you know that there's hope for this. It's important to understand that. The next thing is this. His name is Fritz, and now I can't, Robson? Riveron, thank you. My auto spell corrector was changing it to Robertson. But Riveron, Dr. Riveron was just talking about the virus and about the death rates. You who are here today need to understand something that's very important, because we all want to get back to the old normal. I saw somebody as we were pulling in who had that on their bumper sticker. In order to do that, we're not where a lot of people in the country are mentally yet. And we need to understand that. It doesn't mean that we're wrong. It just means we need to know where they are so that we can talk to them at the level where they are and help them move out of this paralyzing state of fear and into a place where they can respect the deadliness of the virus for those who are at higher risk with the lives and the livelihoods of everyone else. And that's one of the things that I've been doing with Tea Party Patriots Foundation. We created the Second Opinion Project. I worked on that project with Dr. Simone Gold, who will be speaking to you in just a minute. And I've been talking to doctors all around the country for the last over 3 months. It's been almost 4 months now, trying to make sure that the things that I say are medically sound, but also when I read online or I hear people who are telling me things and I can tell they're saying things out of fear, that I go back and I get the correct information so that I can help those people understand. And I think that it's important that you realize that, because to be back to the old normal, it means being able to live with our fellow citizens even when we have really strong political disagreements. And I think what we're seeing right now in many parts of the country is that in some instances, we're not living well with other people. And I think that we're seeing that much more on the opposite side of our political issues, like with rioting that we've seen around the country. I can live with the fact that I'm going to meet people who have different political opinions than me. I've been doing that pretty much a lot of my life, and I can continue to do that. But what I want people to understand is that this virus, it shouldn't be political. It should be medical. And we need to find a way to help make sure that we're balancing politics and trying to separate that from medicine. The response to it definitely has been political. That's why you're in a situation where it's much more government controlled and locked down versus where I am. But the virus itself, we should be listening to doctors, like the frontline doctors that Dr. Simone Gold had, the group she started. One of the things that I've been hearing from I have to deal with people in Washington, D.C. pretty often, and they'll say things to me like, well, what are their credentials? What kind of experts are they? They're doctors, but what else are they? And finally, I got so sick of sitting there going and researching every single doctor to find out every single thing they've ever done in their career. And finally, I just said, you know what? They're the doctors who you and I would call if we're sick. If we're sick, I'm not calling the CDC. I'm calling my doctor who I know. And in my family, it's one of 4. They're the doctors who are touching real live human skin. They're looking people in the eye. They're diagnosing people. They're giving very bad news to some people. And they're helping those people figure out whatever the virus, whatever the disease, whatever the medical condition is, how they can fight it and how they can keep on living. And they do all they can for their patients. That's the kind of doctor who I've been working with. Those are the kind of doctors who I want taking care of me when I'm sick. I don't need the media. I don't need the big tech companies telling me what I need to know. I want to know from my doctors. With that in mind, one thing that I have been saying to people when they don't listen to me when I'm giving them my facts, the facts that I've learned talking to medical experts, and I'm really in a very fortunate situation where I've been in touch with nearly 2,000 doctors over the last 15 weeks. So I can feel good about the knowledge that I have about this virus. But other people are not where I am, and I totally understand that. So I say, you know what, you don't have to listen to me. You can go check out our website. If you don't want to listen to what you're hearing on our website, go ask your own doctor. Get your own personal health assessment. And so that is an action item I want you to remember. If you're running into people and they're yelling at you about masks or they're yelling at you about whatever it is and tell you you don't care about their lives, make sure that they understand not only do you care about their lives, you care about the lives of everyone and the ability for people to put food on their table for their families and the ability for children to be back in school so they have the hope and the optimism they need for their future and they have the education so they can succeed. You do care. And you care so much that you hope whoever you're talking to, will go get a personal health assessment from their own doctor so they can have the right amount of fear based on their own personal health situation. And that has worked really well for me, so it's an action item that I want you to know. Okay, and then I helped organize, I organized the press conference that went viral almost 2 weeks ago with the doctors in front of the Supreme Court. And you're going to hear from a doctor who can tell you the things that Facebook wants to crush and to not to get out there. We're up against the times that we're in right now, we're live streaming this on Tea Party Patriots Facebook page. I encourage you to share it as quickly as you can because I'm sure Facebook will take it down. After all, people up here on the stage have talked about masks, and apparently Facebook doesn't like that. Somehow in the big tech's minds, they've decided that the way to determine what is allowable speech, what is truthful speech, what is information, is to go look at a government website to determine it. And in my opinion, that totally flips the First Amendment on its head. We have the First Amendment so we can question what the government says, so we can petition the government, and so we can challenge what they say. So for a corporation and all these big tech companies who I'm sure are going to take down our video, how dare you do that? Why don't you pay attention to what you're doing and why we even have the First Amendment? You've made your money because of our First Amendment. So you should actually have a little bit of respect for the things that we're doing when we're challenging our government. And the very last thing that I want to say, you've had some elected officials up here, and we are in Wisconsin, so I'm going to shift gears just a little bit and put on my Super PAC hat, because Tea Party Patriots Citizens Fund is a Super PAC. I want you to know that Wisconsin is extraordinarily important as we head into November. We know this at Tea Party Patriots Citizens Fund. We've launched what we call the Patriot Project 2020. And we are looking, there are, out of the 63 million votes that President Trump got in the last election, there were about 6 million of those votes who were voters who had not voted in over a decade, that came out and voted, that we had modeled to be Trump voters. Now, our organization, we don't run a lot of ads, and our Super PAC compared to a lot of others is not nearly as big. What our value is that we have grassroots people just like you around the country who love their country and want to do work. So what we did is we took those people who we've modeled to be Trump voters, but they voted for the first time in forever because they wanted to vote for Trump. And we looked at Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And here in Wisconsin, there are about 230,000 of those voters. President Trump won Wisconsin by 23,000 votes. Yeah, I'm glad that he won, but think about that, 23,000 votes, nearly 250,000, so 230,000 voters who voted for the first time in forever. We have to make sure that we get those voters out to vote again. So around the country, we've had patriots who've been writing postcards to voters here in Wisconsin and also in Michigan and Pennsylvania. We'll be doing text messages and making phone calls to help with the vote here in your state because it's so important. What you're going to need to do is to go be involved in the political campaigns of the people who you like, and make sure that you're doing everything that you can to help locally. Knock on doors, be out wherever you can, given whatever the social distancing rules are at the time, but make sure you're doing everything you can to get out the vote here because it's so important. And I want you to know that patriots across the country are doing all that we can to help your state. And that's part of why I'm here today. I know it's a very frustrating time for you. It's a maddening time. It's a time that's making us so angry and so worried about our country. But you are not alone. We have your back. We want to help make sure we have freedom across this country. We are going to get through the fight with this virus, and we're going to get through the next election. So please have hope. Please keep standing up and doing what you're doing today. And thank you so much for allowing me to come and stand with you for freedom and liberty. God bless you. God bless Wisconsin. And God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Jenny Beth rocks. All right. This is a fantastic day. Jenny Beth was doing such a good job, I almost let her introduce our next speaker, but I'll take that time. Dr. Simone Gold is a board-certified emergency physician and resides in California. She graduated from Chicago Medical School before attending Stanford University Law School to earn her Juris Doctorate degree. She completed a residency in emergency medicine at Stony Brook University Hospital in New York. Dr. Gold worked in Washington, D.C. for the Surgeon General, as well as the chairman of the Labor and Human Resources Committee. She works as an emergency physician on the front lines, whether or not there is a pandemic. Her clinical work serves all Americans, from urban inner city to suburban and Native American population. She writes on a number of policy issues related to law and medicine, and she is the founder of America's Frontline Doctors. Dr. Simone Gold.
Thank you so much. Thank you. First of all, I'm so happy to be here in Wisconsin. It's much better than California. But I was listening, and I'm going to touch a little bit on some of the issues I'm hearing about today about Wisconsin, so sit tight and bear with me till I get to that part. There's a lot that I have to share with you. First of all, I'm going to explain to you why you should listen to me, but not why you should believe me. You should listen to me because of what I've done in my career, right? I've done all of these things. It's true. I'm on the front lines. I see patients with COVID every day. I see lots of other diseases every day. That's what I do, right? You should believe me because everything I'm about to tell you has been fact-checked, double-checked, triple-checked, and referenced. Everything I'm going to tell you, you will find on our website, which I did for the American people. I know this stuff. It's for everyone out here to share with everybody. It belongs to the people. Information belongs to the people. So you can find it at America's Frontline Doctors Summit or the acronym AFLDS, aflds.com. Everything's there, referenced, fact-checked, etc. But given that we're talking so much about masks here in Wisconsin, I can think of 3 reasons why you could wear a mask. None of them are scientific. Reason number 3, third on the list, is you know when you go to a social gathering and there's that relative there that you don't like, they come in for the kiss? So good to have that mask, right? Like, sorry, can't. Reason number 2? Like Joe Biden? Yeah. Reason number 2, it's pretty good for the diet, right? You know, you got that mask on, you can't be like eating all the time. And reason number 1, just this one's I guess is unique to me, is, you know, I was just an emergency doctor till a month ago. Then we came to Washington and we had this video that went viral. I'm told it was the most viral video of all time in the duration 18 million. In 8 hours. So the mask is very good for walking in airports. It's good. Nobody recognizes me. So there is no scientific reason to wear a mask. I don't talk about the mask that much because what you can do for yourself, masks were not invented this year. Masks have been around for decades. Our surgeon can certainly attest to that. But if you Google surgical mask and look for any article written before 2020, nobody ever pretended masks were good for viruses. It's just ludicrous. It's simply a non-issue. That's one of the reasons I don't talk about it. It's just not worth our time. The second reason, though, is that it's a psychological fear question. That's why people are wearing masks. It's kind of like a deep existential question. Am I going to be okay? That's why people are wearing masks. That's why they want you to wear masks. It's just not an argument that's so easy to win. That's why I don't comment on it publicly, but I wanted to validate for you that there is absolutely no scientific justification at all for wearing a mask. None. 0. So I want to break this up just to kind of into 2 parts. The first is like the actual facts on the ground about the virus and about the treatments for it and how we should be reacting to that as people, Americans, and just potential patients or human beings going about our lives. And the second is what this really is in the big picture. So this virus is known as COVID-19. It's the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So right away you remember, if it's a SARS-CoV-2, there must have been a SARS-CoV-1, right? So there was a SARS-CoV-1. It was more than 15 years ago. It also came from China. It also spread out in a pandemic. It didn't get as huge as this one, but this is not new. We doctors know how to manage these things. That one did not become politicized. But SARS-CoV-1 also didn't have a treatment. So they were scrambling around looking for things that they can use to help manage it. One of the things they stumbled upon was chloroquine, which is a precursor to hydroxychloroquine. And in 2005, in the Journal of Virology, published by the National Institute of Health, they discovered that chloroquine works against SARS-CoV-1. It works really well. It works prophylactically, which means before you get it, and it works for early treatment. Very interesting, isn't it? SARS-CoV-1 and SARS-CoV-2 are actually 78% identical. It's kind of curious for a virus that's been called a novel coronavirus. A little bit strange. I'll tell you something else about that. Chloroquine was very promising against SARS-CoV-1. So interesting. Hold on to that thought. Let me return to that. I started on this journey because I was practicing emergency medicine full-time, and I'd be presented with patients that I felt and I knew needed hydroxychloroquine. I knew that from reading the journals, and I would try to prescribe it for them, and I was being threatened that I was going to be fired if I did that. This was incredibly bizarre to me, right? My father's a doctor. I've been a doctor 20 years. This was just bizarre. Who cares what I prescribe for an individual patient? And that's really just strange, weird. But we got letters from the governors telling us that if we were to prescribe it for patients for COVID, we could be brought up as doing something unprofessional or unprofessional conduct, which is a threat to your license. So it's not just a threat to your one job, but to your license. This was happening all across the country. And I remember thinking, this is really, really strange. Isn't anybody else noticing how strange that is? Like put COVID aside, but this is really bizarre. So patients were coming in. They didn't know necessarily that they needed hydroxychloroquine, but they heard negative stuff about it. So they were kind of censored from even discussing it because what they heard was negative. And I'm censored from talking about it because I could lose my job and my license. Crazy stuff, right? And I remember saying to my peers, doesn't this bother you? You know, the doctor-patient relationship? The paper that I got from the state of California, which by the way is in not most, but in many states they have the same restrictions, said a doctor could be brought up on unprofessional conduct and that the pharmacists are empowered to question or overrule the doctors. Nothing against pharmacists, but they're not as well trained as doctors, obviously. They also don't sit and talk with the patient and see the patient and have conversations with the patient. And third, they tend to be employees of large corporations. It's one of the last little bastions of freedom we have left, are doctors talking to patients and patients talking freely to doctors. And it was being massively eroded. And honestly, I couldn't take it. People say, where did this come from? I said, this was a red line in the sand for me as a human being, right? There's a patient. So the first few times I was prescribing it, I was really, it was very unpleasant with my medical director. That it was very clear to me that I was going to be fired if I kept on this path. And this went back and forth, and I started doing more and more digging and more research. And I'd say to my peers, don't you know you've been politicized? And they didn't see it. And like many of you, I thought that the problem was that the president had said on March 19th, I happen to feel good about it. I don't know if any of you were watching the coronavirus task force, but he said, I happen to feel good about it. As an aside, he said he included in that grouping remdesivir, but they only, latched onto hydroxychloroquine. He said, I happen to feel good about it. The next day, March 20th, that was it for hydroxychloroquine. You might as well dig a grave and pour the sand, the dirt in. They were just going to go to, not let anyone get hydroxychloroquine. And I remember thinking, well, they don't like Trump, so they don't like the drug. And I remember thinking that's what it was. I thought that for about 6 weeks or 8 weeks. I forget exactly how long. Then the first remdesivir trials came out, and the media kept saying how great it was. And so I read the study, and I wasn't prejudiced against it, right? As a doctor, I'm used to having multiple options for patients. The more the better, right? And by the way, as an aside, I invested $3,000 in Gilead because I thought, oh, that's good. That's what's coming. I certainly had no prejudice against remdesivir from Gilead. But I'm reading the study, and it wasn't really that good. Right? It just kind of cut the length of stay about 3 days. It didn't improve mortality, right? So patients didn't live that weren't going to live. I was like, well, this is very modest improvement. Why is the media going, crazy how great this is? I thought it was very weird. That was the moment I started wondering what the real story was, right? I don't think it was really primarily about Trump. I think that was a bonus. Started digging and digging and digging. And I'm going to share something that you've never heard before, unless you're really following this stuff. Hydroxychloroquine is over-the-counter in much of the world. It's over-the-counter in almost all of Africa, I think excluding only South Africa. It's over-the-counter, or was until COVID, in Latin America, much of Asia. It was never over-the-counter in America, not because it's unsafe to be over-the-counter, but because the uses for it in America are for lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. We don't really have malaria in this country, so there was no consumer demand, so no manufacturer ever brought it to become over-the-counter. That's okay, so there it is, it's prescription, and that's fine. But it was over-the-counter in France as well. Now here's an interesting little fact. France changed hydroxychloroquine's over-the-counter status. They made it a controlled substance or a prescription-only substance. Remember, Donald Trump mentioned it on March 19th. When do we think France changed it from over-the-counter to restricted only? January 13th. Okay? It was just a bonus that Trump liked it. It was just a bonus. People ask me to speculate why this happened. What I will say is when you knock out the first early contender, you have to see who's left standing. Those are the people that benefit, right? It could be Gilead remdesivir, it could be vaccines, but you've knocked out this early treatment. I just want you to keep that in your mind. Now let's look at some science. You all have heard that maybe it's not safe. That is the most ludicrous. There is no word I can use that is big enough to describe the hoax that's being perpetrated on you to say that. This is a drug that has been FDA approved for 65 years. We give it to children. We really give it to babies even. You give it to pregnant women, breastfeeding women. We give it to the elderly. We give it to immune compromised. There's never been a question. Again, if you Google hydroxychloroquine, try to find any article before 2020, that would be a challenge. There is no controversy about this drug. Hydroxychloroquine is derived from quinine, which is found in tree barks, which George Washington gave his troops. It is non-controversial in the extreme. In fact, it's safer than Tylenol, safer than aspirin, safer than Motrin. In most of the world, they consider it more like a vitamin. In Africa, they call it Sunday, meaning you take it on Sunday, then you take it again the next Sunday, and they do that like their whole lives to avoid malaria. Keep it in their pocket the way you and I might keep Tylenol. That's the drug that you've been hearing about as not being safe. So the first thing you have to wonder when people tell you about, oh, hydroxychloroquine, it doesn't work, take the person who says that back a step and say, I don't really care if it works or doesn't work. Why can't I get access to this safe drug? There's lots of things that are sold in America that are not efficacious. That's capitalism for you, right? You can buy things, right? The FDA is there to approve if a drug is safe. They approved it 65 years ago. There have been billions of dosages. Let it out. Why the restriction? There's a restriction on hydroxychloroquine that is unique in the practice of medicine for decades. It's never happened before. This needs to sink in as to the enormity of the hoax that's being perpetrated on the American people. This does not make any sense. In terms of safety, just to hammer this a little bit, you can go to the CDC website right now, and they talk about hydroxychloroquine for people that are visiting malaria endemic regions. And they'll tell you that anyone can take it. Specifically, they say, I think, children, pregnant women, elderly people, and they have a very exhaustive list of human beings who cannot take it. The exhaustive list is people with psoriasis, period, end of sentence. That's their list of people who can't take it. They also don't have an expiration, meaning you could take it indefinitely, which a lot of people do in Africa. There's many more safety studies. It's all on the website. But the FDA does look backs on medications. I don't want to bore you with too many details, but there is zero question about safety. So if anybody says to you, well, I don't think it works, your answer is, I don't care. I want the same access that they're having across the world. Why can't I get it in America? Now, in terms of efficacy, the other thing that I want to empower you to know, there have probably been more than 50 studies at this point about hydroxychloroquine in the COVID era. Almost all of them show that it works. All of them in the early or prevention stage work. The only potential question is, does it work in the later stage of the disease? Now, of these studies that questioned if it really worked in the later stage of the disease, all of the ones that failed to show a benefit had either too much given, even to the point of giving toxic amounts of the drug. They gave it very late, patients who were already very close to death, or they gave it by themselves, by itself, without zinc. It's been known forever that it works with zinc. How it works is hydroxychloroquine is like the doorman. It opens the door, zinc goes in, zinc actually stops the viral replication. Giving it late in the disease without zinc, you're just trying to show that it doesn't work. So right away when you hear a study like that, I'll go on prospectively and tell you the next study that comes out like that has one of those failings. It was given too much of the dose, it was given at the wrong time, meaning very late, or was given without zinc. I've not seen any that didn't fall into that category. Again, the main thing is that it's safe and you should have access to it like people all over the world. But if it all works. The same, you probably have heard, there's been fraudulent studies like the Lancet, which is the most famous journal in the world actually had a fraudulent study. To be published as a fraudulent study in the Lancet really takes a breathtaking level of conspiracy. It cannot happen by accident. It's impossible. There's too many layers and layers and layers. So it's really kind of given me pause as a physician, very sad. Which brings me to a point that the level of corruption that we have to overcome is enormous, and it's 4 levels. There's the scientific journals themselves that have been corrupted. There's the media, which isn't reporting any good news, and there's a lot of good news to tell you, which I'll get to. There's the state governments, which are regulating how doctors can practice medicine to the detriment of everyone standing here. And there's the federal government with the FDA and the HHS putting restrictions or trying to put restrictions on hydroxychloroquine. You may say, why am I talking so much about hydroxychloroquine? It's because Americans right now are captured by fear. They're so scared that they're going to get this thing, and if they get this thing, they're going to get really sick or die, or grandma or grandpa or uncle or aunt is going to get really sick. It's not true. It's not true. The overwhelming majority of people, and when I say overwhelming, I'm talking like 97, 98%, just an enormous number, have no symptoms at all or have mild symptoms. Some percentage of people do get more ill, like an influenza, which is certainly unpleasant. But the very tiny percentage of people that succumb to this illness almost completely have pre-existing conditions, especially obesity and diabetes. Also could be serious heart and serious lung diseases. But it's overwhelmingly really related to diabetes and obesity and being very frail. So if you're 85 years old and you're living in a nursing home and you've got a couple of conditions and you get COVID, that's a problem. That's bad. Okay? If you're under 60 with no pre-existing conditions, your chances of dying from COVID are less than your chances of dying from influenza. And if you're young, really, yeah. Again, data.cdc.gov. I'm just the messenger. Everything I'm saying you can vet for yourself, and at least some of you, I'm sure, are curious researcher types like me. Data.cdc.gov, and you can look for the deaths by ages. It's especially scandalous what we're doing with our children and our teens and our youth. This is essentially a non-issue for that age group. You know, I feel like saying the emperor has no clothes. Like there just is not an issue. You are much more likely as a child or a teen to die from influenza than COVID. Much more likely. I think it's like, I don't want to say because the media will say I said something wrong, but let's just say much more likely. It's not even close. So the school issue, it's just, I'll leave it to other people to talk, but trust me, it's not about COVID. It's not about COVID. So then when you look at all these things together, you say to yourself, well, what's really going on here? If it's really as kind of, and by the way, let me just be clear. I take care of COVID patients. I'm not a person who's going to stand up here and tell you that this isn't a real disease. It is. But the people we need to be protecting are our frail elderly. That's the group to protect. Everyone else needs to leave their bubble of fear, and the masks and the lockdown and the da-da-da-da. It's all related to fear. So I got very enamored of talking about the hydroxychloroquine solution because I thought, well, how are we going to get rid of Americans' fear? I understand you all are not afraid, but it turns out we're not the majority. There's a lot of people captured by fear. If people knew that they could walk into the local pharmacy and pick up a pill like Tylenol, and they wouldn't get very sick or sick at all, certainly wouldn't die, we'd be done with the fear. That's it. So at first I thought, well, what we need to do is we need to lift the restrictions so doctors can just prescribe as they've normally been prescribing, right? That would do it. But I've become convinced that's insufficient, especially before November. It's insufficient because the corruption is that deep. So I started looking a little more carefully. Let me share with you what the numbers are about hydroxychloroquine. The normal dose of hydroxychloroquine for a lupus or rheumatoid arthritis patient is 400 milligrams every single day for years and years and years. It could be decades. Often it's decades. Would you like to know how much hydroxychloroquine you need to prevent getting sick with COVID? You need 400 milligrams a week. That's it. That's it. So my plea to the president, make it over the counter. Give it to the people. You don't have to take it if you don't want to, and I don't think anybody under 60 without pre-existing conditions needs to take it. But if you're so captured by fear that you're not living your life, then you should. I know a young lady who's 20 years old. She's been in her house, covered in a mask, very anxious baseline personality anyway. These last few months have done her in. That girl needs to be on hydroxychloroquine. She's not living. My elderly parents haven't left their home since March. I cannot get them to take it. They're like, well, maybe it's not safe. Maybe they'll listen if the president changes. I don't know. But what I'm saying is if you're captured by fear, you take the same pill that they're taking in Africa, that they're taking in Nigeria, Cameroon, Costa Rica, Madagascar, and you take it once a week, and you're done. And you know what? Governors won't be able to put on very kind of fascist, dictatorial regulations, because the only reason Americans are complying with these regulations is because they're operating at the level of fear. We really can't solve this masks, lockdown, businesses, school issue until people stop making decisions based out of fear. What I want to wrap up with is why I started to go public in the first place. As I'm watching this unfold, it is true that I'm a doctor and a lawyer. So I came at this kind of with the emotions of a doctor. There were patients who needed hydroxychloroquine who I couldn't give it to. But the lawyer part of me, somebody very interested in policy, was like shrieking inside. There's a medical issue, but there's a legal crisis. And nobody's even talking about the legal crisis. We are losing our civil liberties because there are powers that be that are making Americans operate out of fear. One day, even this will be over. The question is, will your Constitution still be intact when this episode is over? Everyone sitting here, to some extent, more or less, is a warrior, or you wouldn't be here. You may not think you're a warrior, but you are. You sat here in the hot sun, right? It's not easy. But we are not yet at the point of Russia and China, but I'm here to tell you that we're going to get there if ordinary citizens like you and me don't stand up and speak. I didn't start speaking until a couple of months ago. That's the truth. That could be any one of you. You don't have to be a doctor or a lawyer. I'm not an elitist. If anything, I'm a populist. I have a lot of education behind me, but I believe all people are equal. How come you can't get the same access to a drug that would make you not be afraid that I can? I tell you, I've got congressmen calling me wanting the drug, but at least they kind of know me, right? But what about everybody else who doesn't know anybody? And they're afraid. So my point is you have to do something now before you're going to wake up one day and you're going to be in China. All I do is talk about the science. I try to stay away from the medicine, and I've been banned. I don't know if anybody had mentioned it, but when we did our White Coat Summit, the entire purpose of the White Coat Summit was to bring doctors and social media together. I did it in Washington really to get more attention and because I had some meetings lined up with some politicians. But it was about the doctors and the social media to talk to the people. We did 3.5 hours in the morning and we did 3.5 hours in the afternoon. In the middle was a press conference. As you heard, the press conference went viral. I'm told there was 18 million views before it was taken down at about 8 hours. Apparently, that's like an enormous number of people, right? It was deplatformed. It was deplatformed by Facebook. I'm not sure if I'm using that word right. Whatever, they took it down. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Gone. Now, I want to tell you that the press conference was fun, but there's so much education. We talked about how the virus affects kids, how it affects healthy elderly, how it affects the masses, how it affects the frail elderly. And then in the afternoon, we talked about treatments and all the reasons to have optimism. We should not be living in fear, that's for sure. All of that was taken down, these educational videos. They then closed my website, which is patently illegal. But I had to rebuild the whole website. You can imagine, it's been fun times, fun times. But we're getting it up. We have some of them up already. But I encourage you just to learn and watch. It's kind of jaw-dropping stuff. When you realize the degree to which you've been lied to, you're gonna rise up in the streets, and you should, because we probably only have a few more months left before we'll be able to do that. You know, Wisconsin is a forward state, right? I'm living in California. I wouldn't even attempt to have this kind of dialogue in California. It's over. It's done. Like, you can't. You just can't. They close you down. You can't. It's terrible. So if you think it's hard now, I'm telling you, it's much harder later if you don't do something now. Everyone here has to be a warrior. You have to knock on doors. You have to elect people that are going to be for the people, not be for the elite. Okay? As my esteemed cardiac surgeon, by the way, to be a cardiac surgeon and a general surgeon, props to you. As the esteemed surgeon said earlier, you know, doctors have been muzzled. You probably heard I was fired from my 2 hospitals. It's totally fine. It's not about me, right? Doctors have also been silenced. A lot of doctors have also drunk the Kool-Aid. This is not going to be up to the elite to save you. It is up to you to save yourselves, me to save myself. I've got children, right? Everyone here has to do something. Commit today to doing something, helping someone. We're going to be living in China if we don't. I encourage you, just if you want more information, you can go to my website, AFLDS, which is americasfrontlinedoctors.com. Give us another few days. We're going to also put up a map how you can get hydroxychloroquine, because that's the #1 question I get asked. And if you send us an email, just please be patient. We're working through it. I did not expect this to get as big as it did. But we are behind you. We are behind you, and God bless America.
Rocked it. Thank you. We're good. Is she great or what? How many of you are warriors? Are you warriors? Are you in this fight, or are you part of the silent majority? Screw the silent majority. Raise up your voices. Call your legislators. Call them. Facebook is fine. You can whine all you want on Facebook. Call your legislators. Call your senators. Tell them how pissed off you are. Those of you who were at the first rally, remember Vicki McKenna? I was told they had to channel my Vicki McKenna, my inner Vicki. This sucks! Masks suck! I'm so done with this BS. We need to open the schools. We need to take care of the kids. What the hell are we teaching the kids? We're teaching them to be afraid? Bullshit. Sorry, sometimes when I get excited, my language goes, and believe me, it can get a lot worse. A lot worse. I'm tired of this. We need warriors. We need you to get involved, Wisconsin. We need you to step up. We need you to speak up. I'm just a round old Polak who's got a stadium to play with, you know. I do my part, but I need you to do your part. I need you to speak up. I need you to call people, be heard, fight back. Thank you for being here today. Be careful getting out. There's quite a few cars here. We've lost some people along the way. The heat was bad. But as Dr. Gold said, there's some warrior in you because you were here. Carry the fight on. On Wisconsin!
Thank you.
Exactly. I don't know. You know, how is she gonna stand by
Right, Bart?
No, I'm with Tea Party Patriots.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
I saw the sticker on your case. I thought that.
Oh, yeah, I do a lot of work for them.
Yeah, right.
Grew up with them. A young guy, right?
Yeah.
My family is like in the medical military.
But it's $10. It's got a lot of information. You don't have to believe me. It's all reference.
I love learning these things.
You're gonna love it then. Pleasure to meet you. Pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much. Here you guys. Hold on to your state. Did you work on the reservation?
Yeah, and I remember.
We're flyover, man.
No, as I was flying over, I said, "Please come."
I know, it's on screen, but I'm like, did you get to see it?
Not any more than you did. It's all done in the studio. See, that's another
Alexia.
I wish I had you. Thank you.
Well, you leave us have a safe walk. God bless you.
Did you?
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. Come on. Jenny Beth. So we're live still on the for Tea Party Patriots. So how was everything received today in Wisconsin? How'd it go?
Well, the crowd was great. They're very energetic, and they just want to be free here in Wisconsin, as so many people in the country do. And one of the things that we were making sure people understand is that we've got to address the fear and make sure that people have the facts about COVID so our fear can be reduced. I'm sure Facebook's going to delete this video, and so I urge every one of you, if you're watching right now, share it so that the information gets out. Dr. Gold did a great job going through all of the details about hydroxychloroquine, and I was just encouraging people, which I will do again right now, if you run into people who are really and truly afraid, and I know those people are out there, tell them, if you can't convince them with facts and you can't convince them with white papers or whatever else, just urge them, go get your own personal health assessment from your doctor and figure out how at risk you are, so you know how to balance the deadliness of the virus with those who are at high risk, and how to live your life and allow others to live their lives and earn their livelihood.
Now, there were a lot of gasps from the audience when she talked about hydrochloroquine and about some of the things that people really didn't know. People seem to be really surprised at some of the information about hydrochloroquine.
So what I think is that as Dr. Gold was talking, people are very surprised as they learn more about hydroxychloroquine. And I think part of that is that a lot of times what we're hearing on the media is just little tiny sound bites. Laura Ingraham and Tucker and other people have been really good about having doctors on their shows, but they're on for 3 or 4 minutes and then they're off. What Dr. Gold was able to do here today, and what we did in our summit in Washington, D.C. 2 weeks ago, is to make sure that people had more information. And as she went through the details about the medication, about the safety of the medication, about how it's over the counter in other parts of the country, how it's FDA approved and has been for 65 years, I think people were surprised to know that.
You talked about the Second Amendment First Amendment being turned on its head. What do you mean?
Well, what I mean when I talk about the First Amendment being turned on its head, I am not debating Section 230 of the FCC as it relates to social media companies. Well, there's a time and a place to do that, but at the moment, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that the big tech companies deleted our videos, shut us down, deleted the videos that we had. And the reason for it that they gave is they said we're spreading misinformation and that we're not doing things the way that the CDC website says to do it. Well, I'm sorry, but the First Amendment allows us to challenge the government, and the CDC is part of the government. We're allowed to speak, we're allowed to petition our government, we're allowed to have grievances with our government. And for the big tech companies to say, well, we have decided that the only thing that we can consider as information or truth is the government, to me that just turns the First Amendment on its head. The whole entire point is so that we can question the government, not so that we go to the government to decide what is truthful and what is allowed to be said.
So what can people do to help Tea Party Patriots Foundation get the word out like you're doing here in Wisconsin?
Well, what I encourage people to do is to share our website at secondopinionproject.com. From there, you can get to Dr. Gold's America's Frontline Doctors website. We have a white paper on Dr. Gold's website that you can share with other people. And we're going to have action items. Tea Party Patriots every single week has action items for people to engage. This week, last week, and this week, what we're asking people to do is to sign a letter to President Trump, Vice President Pence, and the head of the FDA, Dr. Hahn, urging them to make hydroxychloroquine to issue an emergency use authorization for hydroxychloroquine in the preventative and early phases of COVID-19 when it's in outpatient usage. We shouldn't have to do that. It's an FDA-approved drug. It's perfectly legal right now for doctors to prescribe this medication because it is FDA-approved, whether it's on-label or off-label. But because of what the FDA has done, because of the way that big tech is treating us, because of the way the media is treating us, many doctors in this country are afraid to prescribe it, and then when they do, they're being challenged by individual pharmacists about what the diagnosis is and why they are prescribing it. The doctors are telling me never in their career have they seen something like that happen the way they're seeing it happen with hydroxychloroquine.
Any Closing thoughts?
My closing thoughts are this. Please share this Facebook Live with everyone who you have in your own Facebook feed, or if you're watching on YouTube or another social media platform, share it right now. Make a copy of it from our YouTube page so that if it gets deleted, you've got your own copy and you can continue to share it. We can't trust the big media companies not to censor us, and so what we're urging you to do right now this minute is to share it. And the next thing is to make sure you go to teapartypatriots.org and get the weekly action item and be engaged. We're not going away. Lives of Americans are at risk right now, and there are things that we can do to help save lives, help reduce hospitalizations. Dr. Harvey Risch from Yale University, who is an epidemiologist, has said he believes that if hydroxychloroquine is administered to people who are high risk, we could reduce the deaths by 50% to 3/4. This is about Americans' lives. And then beyond that, just keep staying with us for our action items. So don't go away. Keep being involved. America's lives are at risk, and we can reduce the fear as we get more information out. And that's what we have to do for our country, so we come out of this as a whole country. And I think every American, or 99% of Americans, that's what they want.
And sometimes they do a good job of quarantining, but sometimes they don't. So like, they talk a lot about it going on in like New York. It's going on here. No one's talking about it. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. So just keep your eyes open. Just keep your eyes open. I know you can't fight the system just by yourself, but at least keep your eyes open. Well, inform people.
Thank you
It was a
for
pleasure to meet
speaking.
you.
You were really great. I mean,
Okay,
I consider myself informed, and there's a lot of stuff that you were saying that I was like, wow, I didn't even know that.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad.
It
That
was
makes
very-
it really worthwhile.
It's very informative.
Thank you.
And I'll be using it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Bye, you guys.
So what was it like today speaking out to the crowd here in Wisconsin? Jenny Beth?
Listen, I started this journey just to bring facts and truth to the American people. We brought a lot of doctors to Washington we brought a lot of doctors to, should we start again?
No, keep going.
We brought a lot of doctors. We brought a lot of doctors to Washington just to talk to the American people. We talked about how it is for children, how it is for healthy elderly, how it is for the frail elderly, how it should be for the middle age group. And we talked about possible treatments, of which there's many, and we definitely talked a lot about fear. And the fact is that the Americans don't need to be living in fear. There's a lot of things you can do. First of all, most people are either asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic, or recover fully even if they do get symptoms. The small percentage of people that are going to get very sick, there's treatments for them. First of all, you could treat them early with hydroxychloroquine and zinc. Also, later in treatment, there's treatment. So my biggest message here is that there's a lot of hope. There's no reason to be captured by fear. And go to my website, AFLDS, America's Frontline Doctors, and you'll learn a lot more.
Dr. Gold, some people came up to you afterwards and they're talking about things that they didn't know already about hydroxychloroquine. Could you reiterate those items in case there are people who are watching for the first time right now and hearing from you?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. So hydroxychloroquine is a very safe drug. It's been FDA approved for 65 years. It derives from quinine, which is found in tree barks. George Washington gave it to the troops. It's actually over the counter in much of the world. Almost all of Africa, excluding South Africa, much of Latin America, it's over the counter. It was over the counter in Canada and Mexico. It was over the counter in France until COVID. So this is a very safe medicine. There's no reason to be afraid of it. It's safer than Tylenol, aspirin, and Motrin. So the concern is, why are we being told that it's not safe? It's very curious. And it's not actually true. It's completely safe. You can wonder and have a legitimate question is, does it work? Now the studies are in. There's about 40 studies that show that it's very effective, especially if used pre-getting the virus prophylactically or early treatment. But even in later treatment, it is very effective. So my suggestion to state governors is to just loosen up the restrictions back to the way it always was. Let doctors decide. Let doctors and patients together make a joint decision. And if the doctor feels that it's indicated, let the patient take hydroxychloroquine. If you knew that you had hydroxychloroquine as an available option, then you would no longer be captured by fear and we could resume our normal American lives.
Dr. Gold, do you think that if this medication is in the hands of more Americans, that we'll be able to go back to living our lives? One of the people who are watching right now is saying that, if there's a pill, why don't we have that, and why aren't we using that?
Right. So that's exactly the issue, is that we're not being held down by the virus as much as we're being held down by the fear. There's a kind of a spider web of fear all around us, and it's constricting us, and it's constricting the lifeblood of the American people and of the American economy. Many people who are consumed by this fear would no longer be consumed by fear if they understood there was a pill they could take if they needed it. Lots of other people who aren't as afraid would like to just go back and resume their lives, but are being told by governors that they can't do that. So the pill is the solution for everybody. The people who are captured by fear can know that there's a treatment if they need it, and the other people can just go back to their regular lives. So I advocate for having widespread availability. At the very least, it should go back to the way it was before March 2020, which is simply let a doctor and a patient decide together if they can use the medication if it's indicated. But I actually would advocate, and I'm hoping that we can get even further, which is to have it over the counter like it is in much of the world.
One person is asking who is forbidding the distribution, and one thing that I talked about a few minutes ago and that you've talked about is that it really is legal right now for doctors to prescribe it because it's FDA approved. Would you go through that and why we're having so much trouble right now getting it?
Yes, so that's a really important point. So when a drug becomes FDA approved, that means that a doctor can use it for any indication whatsoever. So a drug might be approved, for example, for pneumonia, but once it is FDA approved, a doctor could use it for something else, like a skin infection or a bladder infection. The FDA's only role is to determine if it's safe. Once it's safe and available by prescription, then it's up to the doctor to decide. If a doctor uses it for the reason that it was indicated per the FDA, that's called on-label usage. If a doctor prescribes it for a reason that wasn't requested to the FDA, that's called off-label usage. So historically in American medicine, there was no distinction between on-label and off-label. That was merely up to the physician. Doctors are already held to numerous regulations, medical malpractice. We don't really care if something is on-label or off-label. For the first time, really, I think ever in American medicine, we've taken an FDA-approved medicine and we've said, even though it's off-label, we can't use it. This has really never happened before. Also, there is nothing that's on-label for COVID. You know, hydroxychloroquine is as on-label as anything else. So the people that are withholding our ability to get it is predominantly state governors who've authorized the state medical boards and the state pharmacy boards. They've said to the state medical boards have sent letters out to doctors saying they could be tasked or not really charged, but told they were practicing unprofessionally or unprofessional conduct, and they've empowered pharmacists to overrule doctors. That really has to stop. It's never happened before. We need to stop that.
I'm going to ask another question about hydroxychloroquine, but first, would you please tell everyone your website? They're asking that.
Yeah. So please go to AFLDS, which is acronym for America's Frontline Doctors.com, AFLDS. You will find a lot of educational material there, and very soon we're going to have a map of the United States which will show how easy or difficult it is to get hydroxychloroquine in your state, and we're going to link that to telemedicine providers, doctors and nurse practitioners who can discern and discuss with you via a consultation if hydroxychloroquine is right for you.
Okay, one thing that one person said is to take the white paper with them as they go to the doctor. I think that's a good point, and you can get that white paper by going to resources or references on her website. Would you go through what's wrong? The FDA and big tech will say, oh, hydroxychloroquine doesn't work, and they're pointing to studies that say it does not work. There are more studies that say it does work, but what is wrong with the studies where it's shown it has not been effective?
Yeah. So I just tweeted this out yesterday. So all of the studies where hydroxychloroquine and zinc together are used early or prophylactic, which is preventive. So preventive or early, it always works, always. The only studies where it was shown to have a modest effect, neutral effect, or possibly negative effect were when hydroxychloroquine was given late in the disease, which is a whole different thing. Hydroxychloroquine should work early. That's the mechanism of action. Its usefulness later in the disease is much more modest. But even the studies that were done late that showed it had a modest effect or minimal effect, all of those studies were flawed. They either gave the medicine in too high a dose, often in toxic doses, or they gave it patients too late, patients who were already so sick they couldn't be helped, or they gave it without zinc. All of them. So I want to emphasize, this drug works.
I'm sure we'll be taken down from social media for saying that, but it does work, and we want people to understand it is a safe drug. It is FDA approved. It's been around for 65 years. Make sure that you check out Dr. Gold's website. Is there any last thing you want to say, and then I'll wrap it up?
Well, before YouTube censors us, I want to say that if you have any data, if it works, you just need to look at the numbers in sub-Saharan Africa. They have a fraction of what we have, less than 1% of our rates. That's because everyone there is on chloroquine. Thank you.
Please make sure you're going to Dr. Gold's website at AFLDS. Did I get that right? AFLDS.com and teapartypatriots.org. We'll continue to have calls to action. Make sure you share this Facebook Live feed. And remember the white paper, one person who was watching just said to take that white paper with you if you need to get this from your doctor. If your doctor is giving you any concerns, I think that is great advice. Take the white paper that she wrote, refer them to her site in the compendium that Drs. Harvey Risch and Zelenko have published out in New York. It's a 300-page document with lots of research on the medication. Thank you so much for joining us today, Patriots. We appreciate everything that you do for our country, and we're going to keep standing with you for freedom and keep on fighting with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke.